welcome to How Does the Art World Work? My name is Matt Nasser.
I'm Bartholomew Bland.
I'm Claudia Bias.
And I'm the guest, Oliver Herring.
This is Oliver Herring. I met through my friend Harrison Tenzer, and Oliver has been really great to jump in today because we've been trying to get Harrison, and he's got schedule issues. And
we'd rather have Oliver. That's our takeaway. We heard good things about him. Very telegenic for a podcast.
Where's your accent from, Oliver?
I'm German. I'm half German, half English. But my dad is English, my mother German. But I grew up in Germany, so culturally I'm more German, hence the accent. So I had to learn English the hard way by going to language school, and I'm still working on it.
And where in Germany did you grow up?
Between Heidelberg and Mannheim, which is between Frankfurt and Stuttgart.
Oh, very nice. And how long have you been in New York?
Since 1990.
Oh, so quite some time.
Yeah.
Very nice. And tell us about your art career. How long have you been working as a professional artist?
I don't know about professional, but I've been working as an artist from the point of going to art school, really. Not that I thought of myself or still think of myself as an artist exactly, but I think art school has sort of provided me with the tools of thinking about art or thinking in a creative way, how to move through life. And so I'm sort of rolling with that. You know, I think I probably would have been just as happy doing something else. I'm not one of these artists who who discovered at an early age that they need to make art. I just sort of slipped into it and ran with it, and it seems to work for me, so I keep doing it.
Now, I'm very impressed with what you do. The little bit that I could dig in, because when I heard you would be our guest, I read your interview with Jerome, and it's very interesting. And I'm fascinated by the fact that you work with other people and you invite them and you just allow them to express their creativity in your own creation. I think that's fascinating. It sounds to me like a Burning Man type of thing. Your task. I'm talking about the task.
Yeah, and I mean task, which is it's a very loose, simple structure that anybody can really apply. You just need a space, some people, and some materials, and go online and find out what it is, because I don't want to take up too much time.
It would take all the whole.
Yeah, but because it's so simple and accessible, it's really become a tool in a lot of classrooms all over this country, but also way beyond.
Yeah, it's super fascinating. And I also really enjoyed your, what you did, like Yves Klein type of figures, where you put yourself on the paper and you made like the Ellsworth Kelly kind of, drawings of yourself.
Well, that's right. You actually liked on my Instagram feed. Those are the images that you liked.
Yeah, I liked
so
them
I knew
a lot.
that you would be drawn to them. Yes.
Yeah, they were very good. I
Thank
think
you.
It's like Matisse shapes and Ellsworth Kelly with just simple colors, but it's at the same time it's a little bit Yves Klein combination in a way, right?
Yeah, I mean, it came from a different place. During the pandemic, like many people, I dug deep into the web and sort of fell in love with Vaslav Nijinsky, the dancer choreographer. And his ballet L'après-midi de Faune, Afternoon of a Faun, which he choreographed in 1912. So it's considered an early modernist ballet, an early modernist experiment, because it was one of the first of its kind, so there was really no precedence for it. And the movement language that he developed for this ballet was inspired by the depiction of figuration on Greek vases and frescoes, and Egyptian and Etruscan vases and frescoes. And so he built a movement language that aspired to flatness, radical flatness, which was a early modernist conceit. And so these images that you saw are actually screenshots that I took of myself rehearsing this ballet. I taught myself this ballet during the pandemic, and which is in fact what I'm going to be performing here in a few days, but in the city. But yes,
where? I'd love to see that. I mean, I couldn't find it on YouTube. I was looking for it.
Yeah, I'm still holding off, but it's going to be at 302 Bowery, the former Patricia Fields store, which gives it a little
when is it going to
additional
be?
history. I'm going to do this during the Armory week as an Armory offsite project for the first week. And I think I'm going to perform on the 6th, the 7th, and the 8th.
Wonderful.
And then we're going to run for another week independent of the Armory in that same space. And I don't really have a performance schedule for that yet.
Well, I'm very impressed that you remembered all of that. And you have it on the top
Well,
of your head.
that's what I spent my morning doing.
Being ready to
Logistical
log,
details.
Yeah.
Talking to people, yeah.
I was just going to say, tell us about what you're actually showing at the Armory Fair proper.
So the Armory is actually sort of a nice counterpoint to this Nijinsky-inspired project. I'm doing a booth with Bank Gallery from Shanghai. And it's going to be work from the 90s. This is the 30th anniversary of the Armory. They started out as the Gramercy Art Fair. And so the focus section is going to focus on the Armory's roots. So there's going to be a lot of work from the olden days. And so I'll be showing work from the 90s, including work inspired by Ethel Eichelberger, and that sort of developed during the AIDS crisis. So for me, the juxtaposition of doing a project that was triggered by Eichelberger and something in relation to Nijinsky just seems to be such a perfect fit. They're both queer people in the performing arts who tragically died prematurely. And so, so that's what I'm going to do.
Very interesting.
I love that, obviously I come from a visual arts and theater background, so I love artists that are bridging that gap. But I find when I talk with people, and the people that are brave enough to bridge that gap, they're often very frustrated with the different cultures, and also as far as how does the art world work, how to monetize their work and making a living and sustaining their work in a place for example, you're at an art fair, which is generally like, so buy this painting, and you're doing something completely different. How has that experience been?
I think I keep a low overhead, and I don't think I've made many decisions where I thought about money, not because I don't need it, but because I sort of figured out ways of scraping by, whether it's a talk here or a little project there. So it's sort of worked somehow. In fact, I often think about why we can't figure out ways for artists to come up with structures to empower ourselves, independent or as an addition to the big machine. Mm-hmm. I mean, everything plays a role, including these art fairs and galleries and museums. They're important, they are. But there are a lot of artists that fall through the cracks because they don't quite fit that profile to succeed within that profile, within those parameters. Right. And I don't know, somehow I can't give you a blueprint exactly for how this works, but I'm still standing.
Have you, I'm sure you saw the article that ran in the Times recently about artists whose careers had sort of had a huge ramp up in the last few years, and have now, as their work is coming to auction, are selling sort of like 5 and 10 cents on the dollar from what the original collectors paid for it, and the damage that does to a particular artist's career. Have you experienced times in that, and since you've been working in New York since the early 90s, where you've had commercial decisions to make that have been difficult? I
mean, I grew up at a time when I came to New York and to do an MFA at a time when the art market or the general market had crashed. Right. So I don't think any of us had any illusions that we could make money with art. So a lot of the decisions that went into making art were very independent of money considerations. It was really about ideals and ideas. And I still am shaped by that. I don't really think about the money. In fact, even though I'm doing something with the Armory, the way I think of it is it's the 30th anniversary of the Armory. It used to be the Gramercy Art Fair. I was actually participating in one of these early iterations. I forgot that, actually. I was recently reminded that I had been a part of that because it was so chaotic. And what I remember is, how sweaty it was and how much fun it was, because I had no idea if, that person sleeping there was a performance or somebody, falling asleep. And I think the focus section is really honing in on that history. And also I'm working with a friend. I'm working with the person who runs that gallery. They don't have a profile here. So we're doing 2 ambitious projects, and we're 3 people and an intern. So the whole operation, is very ambitious, but we're in each other's hair for every single decision. And it actually sort of harkens back to that spirit, this DIY spirit of having to figure out everything at every given moment because there's no infrastructure. So I'm actually having a really great time doing this.
Wonderful.
And I totally lost my train of thought. Where did it start?
Well, because
that's the coffee racing me.
Finding the gallery, right, has been like an ambition of yours at some point.
Finding a gallery?
A gallery that represents you and your
not
work.
Really.
You never wanted a gallery?
No, I haven't had a gallery in at least 10 years. I've been working with this gallery in Shanghai a little bit, but I've been working mostly with non-for-profits, with museums, types of cultural institutions, educational institutions. And
so is that working? I mean, the income is sort of derived from a grant model of
No, I'm a terrible grant writer, actually.
Terrible grant writer.
Never won a grant, ever.
That's
because I think I applied 2 times, and maybe my English was bad, or maybe because I didn't know the trigger words that you're supposed to put in there, but I didn't get the grants. And but yeah, I think I built enough of some sort of momentum between splitting my time between doing some work in education, especially with Task.
Where institutions want to work with you, and you've got a long track record now.
Yeah, and anybody can do a task. They don't need me for that. It's free as long as it states non-for-profit. But if you invite me in to help organize this, then obviously I'm going to be paid for my time. It's the same with museums. I've been sort of moving from one institution to another. Sometimes I spend a month, sometimes I spend 3 months there. There's usually an artist fee involved.
Are you do you picture yourself as being in residency when you're doing those
I don't know. I'm not sure about the terminology. It is sort of a residency, but it's also, I think of it more as sort of an experiment with equal partners, where I go into a situation without a plan. So the institution takes on the risk of really not knowing what we're in for. So a lot of our time goes into building infrastructure that allows me as much freedom as possible. So there are a lot of questions of what's actually available, what can we do? Also, what does the institution want from me? Why am I there?
Well, what intrigues you about going to an institution? Is it time, space,
resources,
audiences?
All of it, different audiences. I actually have learned that, especially curators who work at museums, cultural non-for-profits, I've had some amazing experiences. They're creative people, and but come from a different point of view than I am, and so in a way it becomes like a conversation between us of, well, what can we do together if we consolidate our experiences and resources, and towards what end? And because I don't really have a clear set of objectives, I just have sort of my toolkit of experiences.
So like what example? Give us one example of something you've done in a museum.
In a museum in China, in Xi'an, I ended up working. Their main objective was to expand their demographics of who goes into the museum. So actually in Chengdu, sorry, not Xi'an. And the first thing I did was push them to reach out to a lot of educational institutions, just to sort of create some foundation or connection between whatever we are doing curatorially or creatively with something that has educational purpose. So that became actually a really great foundation. There were all these universities that jumped on board. Their museums and museum galleries sort of offered their facilities. They offered their printmaking workshops, or whatever they had. They offered, plus students that were interested in.
So you kind of coordinated all these people to develop a project all together.
Yeah, and
that was
it
like
happened
you
on the
make
fly.
like the parameters of the project.
Yeah, the parameters were we figured out through Zoom conversations before I ever showed up there. So it's like, why do you want me there? And then we developed some sort of...
And it's a one-off thing.
It's a one-off thing. We ended up...
but it's like this amazing collaboration, and people get to know each other, and you put people together in a collaborative where everybody's making art.
Everybody is not necessarily making art, but everybody is sort of being taken out of their comfort zone, or everybody sort of signs on to wanting to be taken out of their comfort zones, whatever that is. And then part of what happens is to figure out how I can make myself useful in that context, while at the same time also producing something. But that something is very, very open. It can be anything. And a lot of it is determined by who participates, people's comfort zones.
I saw this thing you were doing, this video that I could watch briefly, where these people are being carried around. And I mean, I was just thinking, and they could fall down and break their necks. It's kind of like dangerous what you do.
Well, if it's dangerous, it may look dangerous. There is a little stagecraft involved usually. But actually, maybe that was the one time there was a little danger involved. But
they climb upstairs very high up.
What are you actually talking about?
Talking about all these things you do. I saw them. No, wasn't there one where there's a lot of people dancing, and the hands, many hands, and many legs, and people climbing upstairs? There was that, and then there was the other one where you forgot about it. You did it.
I did.
Then there was another one where people are they carry somebody and they turn them around, and then the person jumps on people and people catch him.
Right. Okay.
I mean, what if they don't catch him?
Well, parents were right there. There were some kids involved. And
the parents are not going to do anything with that broken face.
Nobody got broken.
No, I know.
Anything.
I saw that was very good, actually.
Nobody broke anything.
So it seems like a lot of the work that you're doing is ephemeral, is happening. So how important is documentation for your work? I mean, is that, I feel like artists that work in your way are obsessed with documentation, or, I mean, is that...
It's actually a lot less important.
Oh, okay.
Like, for example, this performance that I'm going to be performing. I've been performing this in the studio for the last 2 years to word of mouth audiences. And my limit, the top number that I have allowed in was 10 people.
Oh, wow.
So my ideal number is, 3 to 5 to keep it intimate. And there's no documentation of that. And I kind of love the idea of this just being some sort of ephemeral moment. It's sort of still, it's in your brain, maybe not. And I think there's value in that, I mean, moving this now into another location is going to be a new chapter in this piece. And I'm not exactly sure what that means. I had it filmed once in the studio. I brought somebody in, a friend of mine, and he brought this kick-ass camera. And it just felt wrong. For a while I was thinking that maybe I should film every single one of these the next 50 performances. Maybe I should just film them and then turn it into this impossible document that nobody can really watch, because that's sort of how it feels to me.
It's because very Joseph Bias of you, no?
Yeah, I think that's right.
Could you envision giving yourself something like written, like if someone wanted to acquire the piece, or I know you said a lot of them are ephemeral, that it would have another life where you would leave written instructions that another artist would do X, Y, and Z to do their own version of the piece, for instance.
It's funny that you say this, because this is so sort of where I've landed on. The fact that I can find license to do this Nijinsky piece comes in part from the fact that the Nijinsky piece isn't really locked in. There is really no filmic documentation of Nijinsky ever doing this. And for a long time, the only way this piece survived was through word of mouth, and notes that, from Stravinsky and Debussy, who had witnessed it, and dancers who had been part of the Ballet Russe circle.
Were they keeping the dance alive? They were
keeping it alive post
the steps,
post Nijinsky, but Nijinsky himself changed the ballet multiple times, and so the Joffrey Ballet in the 80s went through this sort of forensic process. It took about 2 years to reconstruct this ballet as close to what they thought was the original. And Rudolf Nureyev, then the most famous sort of male dancer, danced that role. Since then, Nijinsky's notations of the ballet have been decoded. And so now there is a more accurate version that's actually Nijinsky's notated version.
Well, I'd be interested to know how far off they were from the excavated version.
There's definitely discrepancies, but I think the overall spirit is actually pretty much there. I think the notated Nijinsky version is softer, it's gentler. The Nureyev version, or the Joffrey version, is harder. It's much sort of edgier in terms of the angles that of the dancers. There is some discrepancy about how the ballet ends famously with a simulated orgasm. Scandalous in its time, and still, able to raise eyebrows, but there is some discrepancy of how explicit that simulation was. And supposedly, even with Nijinsky, there was a shift from the very first, from the premiere and the preview, where it seemed to have been more explicit than the next day when there was a riot. And then the police came and he did it in a slightly pacified version. And the notation, sorry, this is all very technical, but he notated this ballet 3 years after he had actually performed it. So there probably is some discrepancies there too.
And your ballet, you're going to be performing this. You're going to be doing this in the booth.
Not in the booth, in an offsite space, 302 Bowery.
Okay. But you're going to stay true to everything you've learned?
Yeah.
You're going to do your version of everything you've researched.
I am doing a solo version.
Including the ejaculation.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't oversell the ejaculation. Really, it's
famous last words. But it's also
put it on my gravestone.
That's a good segue too. This is refreshing to me because I was wanting to talk about legacy, like artists. What am I leaving behind? What am I leaving behind? And you're saying, I don't want to document this. I want it to be in people's minds. I want this sort of thing, and that's very interesting to me.
But Matt, actually, I forgot. I was actually somewhere en route to answering his question.
Oh, yes, about whether
remind me of what you were just going to get at.
Whether you could notate the equivalent of notate a performance.
You got it. So yes, I kind of like that whole mystery, the license that it gives me to find myself into this piece or use it for my own purposes. And so the only visual documentation of that performance that exists is of audience who clandestinely took snapshots, and then some of them shared them with me later. And I kind of like that. And, people writing notes to me, and maybe I get some of them to write little things down. And I think this grouping of sort of fragments will present enough of a framework for somebody down the road to perhaps reboot my once I'm dead. It might give somebody license to
because there's always that interesting, right? The Joffrey wanted to
if the
Joffrey's
still around, they can do the Nijinsky Nureyev version, and then
are both versions performed regularly, or
the sort of notated version was done, I think, by the Berlin Ballet, but I've actually never seen a full version of it. There's actually a gorgeous show at the Morgan Library right now on the Ballet Russe, and they have two little snippets from the Berlin Ballet doing Faun.
Leonard Bast was I think the costume designer for those.
Yeah, Baxt. Yeah. Just to me, he was like the revelation of that exhibition. I'd never actually seen Baxt.
I've shown some of his work in different shows, and it was beautiful.
Unbelievable. I had only seen them reproduced online, and it's just very different to see the tactility and
what is
gentleness.
this you guys are talking about?
It's a set
They were
design.
the set designs for the Ballet Russe and the costume designs, the original from the 20s, I guess.
Yeah.
And actually, if you go to the Russian tea room, I think they're all over the bathrooms, reproductions of those drawings. So.
Yeah.
Little bit here in New York.
So to talk about like living in the moment and living in the present and just enjoying what you're doing in the moment, which is basically what you're saying, that is the most important thing, basically, right?
Yeah.
Which I agree 100%. I just like to paint in my studio by myself without the help of anybody. Very selfish, but that's just what I like to do. And then all the rest is just like a massive amount of insanity and nightmare. I don't want to say exactly what I mean, but Marina
Leave our
Abramovich,
audiences wanting to know exactly what's
they
happening.
understand what I'm talking about. Marina Abramovich, when she sat at the museum, right? She just sat there, and then people came and sat with her, and they were present. The artist was present, and they were present, and people took it in their head what it felt like to be there with her, right? So that's like similar to what you are doing in the sense of like not necessarily just making everybody a part of your thing in a way, right? You like people to join your creative impulse.
Yeah, sort of basically creating platforms where we can sort of come together. So it's not like they're just joining me. I mean, yes, they are joining my project, but I'm also in a way joining whatever they want to explore, I'm not set on what that is, and that too very often shapes the direction of the project. So I have to generally take a big step back. My ego takes a big step back because part of the process is just simply listening and watching and allowing things to unfold without, edits or judgment, and just sort of occasionally I throw curveballs to just get people off their sort of rehearsed responses until we've built some ease and trust and confidence in each other, and then we start to play.
I just find it important to somehow, like Matt would say, record this or keep it somehow, because I mean, what is the point of it all? I mean, I guess we're just dealing with the absurd. But for example, my mom lives in the very present moment, and she forgets the next minute what happened. Yeah. What's the value in that? I have a very difficult time dealing with that. It's really too fleeting. How much of the present moment are we going to be interested in?
But if everything's going to be ultimately obliterated, then maybe living moment to moment is okay, just for the value of that moment.
So depressing.
I don't think so. I actually, my husband's mother also has dementia, and same situation. Luckily, she's sort of trapped in a happy loop. Mm-hmm. But we've sort of learned how to, if we engage her in the present, she's sharp.
Absolutely.
She's really, really sharp.
Really sharp.
And even though she forgets about it 2 minutes later, but if you can keep her in that present moment and engage her meaningfully, she's still full of zingers and,
Absolutely.
And I find that actually incredibly hopeful, because it's not, I think people, it's so easy to just sort of think of that person, as somebody who you can't engage with anymore. But that's taking language very literally, and I think as an artist, I've sort of I love figuring out alternative ways of communicating with a person. And this has actually been an amazing experience to connect with somebody meaningfully in the moment. And you know that the next moment it's gone, but you sort of celebrate the moment. And as you, Bartholomew, as you just said, I mean, it's all going to be over, at some point. And I mean, but that's beautiful. I wouldn't want to live forever.
No, that's true.
It would be horrible.
I started doing something pretty terrible. I started calling my mother on FaceTime because I'm not near her. So I'm calling her on FaceTime, and then with my iPad, I'm filming her, and I'm showing her my paintings, and she's criticizing them. And it's quite funny because there are times when I call her, and she's like wearing her rollers in her head. So this is my new kind of delving into your performance situation, but not really. I don't think I'm ever going to show this to anybody.
Is she able to make insight? Well, the more the point is in the moment, is she able to make insightful criticism?
So insightful. She helps me so much.
That's great.
It's such a fascinating thing for me. I mean, it really works. She's present. I engage with her. At the end, she says, I just had the best time. That was so much fun. And I'm like devastated because she criticized every single painting.
That's also her role.
She's like, you have money, paint over it. You have buy more paint.
Do it again. Sisyphus.
It's
a Sisyphus.
Every single painting I show her.
Oh.
Has she liked any of them?
But that's her role. My mother still criticizes my hair. It doesn't matter what hair, there's a little hair left, but it's still, open to some review.
And your mother likes our podcast, you said?
No, but she loves my hair.
Wow. Our mother should meet.
How about your mother?
My mother shows me pictures of what she wants my hair to be.
That's what my mother did when I grew up. Every morning there was a picture of a handsome young man.
Why do you do this? What about this? Except what I've done. So thanks. Anyway, I guess that's
we all have the same
legacy.
But you had a question. You were starting with something.
The legacy. We could end with that of like artists thinking about what they leave behind, and this world we live in. Why I said it was refreshing of documenting everything. When we started this podcast, we thought we'd record it, and then everybody, you have to film it. We have to film the podcast. Yeah. But anyway.
I do write journal. I journal, but that's mostly for myself. There were some years when I moved from project to project, and by the end of the year, I couldn't remember anything except a few sort of milestones, and I thought that life is just way too short for that. Mm-hmm. So I've been trying to figure out ways to slow time down, and journaling a little bit actually helps me keep track of details. But it's mostly for myself. Beyond that, in terms of leaving a legacy, it's sort of, I don't know, I think it's kind of irrelevant because in 100 years, every single person I know is going to be dead. And the world is going to be a completely different world. I have absolutely no idea what the parameters of looking at art, what the problems of the world, are going to be in 100 years, in 150 years, in 50 years. And so why worry about that? Not at all.
Let's not. Let's go to lunch.
I like that.
Good
So
idea.
this was How Does the Art World Work? We hope you learned something.
Which we didn't address
from
at all.
Oliver.
We did.
We did. No, this was very informative. Well, you certainly, of all the artists we've had on, have a very different perspective. I think not sort of lusting after a commercial gallery and that kind of a success, but finding your way through an own individual path. That's a very interesting model, and certainly the fact that you've been doing this for almost 35 years, in fact, many in the art world are sort of coming around to this, seeing the problems with the commercial art world. And so you may actually have ended up being a visionary in your own way.
And also this idea of keeping a low profile and keeping a low overhead is very important as an artist. Keep a low overhead. Yes. These artists that we read about in the Times, they spend the money, probably went and bought a yacht.
Expensive studio space. I mean, yes, I was working with someone recently who is a successful artist, but the bills kept rising because they kept expanding, and then they were sort of on this kind of hamster wheel of they had to produce X number of works and sell them at X prices. Right. So now they've decided to go back to working out of their bedroom, and just to get rid of the pressure of having to produce at that level. So
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being with us today.
It's
Thank
a
you,
joy
Oliver.
to be here.
Thank you, Oliver.
Thank you.
Thank you.